We all know the cycle. You wake up with grand plans to launch a business, master your finances, and get in peak physical shape. Yet by 2 p.m., you find yourself staring blankly at open tabs, scrolling social media, and completely drained of energy. Popular culture tells us the solution is to find more motivation. But motivation is merely an emotion. By biological design, human emotions fluctuate constantly in response to our environment, blood sugar, and daily stress levels. Relying on an emotion to build a stable, long-term outcome is a mathematical error. The world's most effective leaders and elite performers do not wait to feel inspired. Instead, they rely on rigid, tested systems. They build structural rules into their days that force execution, whether they feel like working or not. Building that level of execution requires a specific sequential blueprint. You cannot fix your financial decades until you wire your monthly habits, and you cannot wire those habits until you learn how to control a single block of minutes. To control the trajectory of the next 5 decades of your life, you have to master the next 5 minutes of your day. Looking at this diagram of 10 daily tasks, we can apply the 80-20 rule, or the Pareto principle, to act as the ultimate filter. Out of 10 items on a typical to-do list, roughly 80% of your actual measurable progress will come from just 2 of those tasks. The rest is mostly noise. Productivity experts call those 2 critical tasks your frogs, the vital, difficult work you usually try to avoid. Because cognitive stamina peaks early, you have to extract those high-leverage items and execute them at the absolute beginning of your day, before decision fatigue sets in. But holding focus on a difficult project is physically demanding. Modern behavioral research shows that the average worker in a digital environment hits a severe distraction threshold, losing focus in just 11 minutes. The most effective mechanical tool to bypass that threshold is the Pomodoro technique. You silence all notifications, set a timer, and sprint on a single task for exactly 25 minutes, followed immediately by a strict 5-minute break. Winning the day doesn't require grinding at a desk for 12 hours. It requires ruthlessly guarding your peak morning energy and funneling it entirely into short, intense sprints of high-leverage work. Once you can control a single morning, you have to string those mornings into weeks. The primary psychological barrier here is the hesitation window, a 5-second gap where your brain generates excuses to kill a new uncomfortable behavior before you can take action. You neutralize that gap using the 2-minute rule. You shrink the new behavior down to its smallest possible component, like reading just 1 page or simply putting on your gym shoes. Shrinking the entry point lowers the barrier so far that it requires 0 willpower to begin. As you execute that 2-minute action daily, you track it visually on a physical calendar, a practice known as the Seinfeld chain rule. Over time, that growing visible streak triggers loss aversion in your psychology. You push through the discomfort simply because you refuse to break the chain. This calendar tracks the first phase of habit formation. It takes exactly 21 days of unbroken consistency to carve out a faint new neural pathway in your brain. This initial phase requires deliberate effort and discipline to keep the chain intact. If you sustain that chain for a full 90 days, the repetition physically reinforces those pathways. The action shifts from a conscious, difficult effort into an automatic biological execution. Consistency is a physical mechanism that quite literally rewires your brain. Pushing past that 90-day mark transforms the habit from an action you force yourself to do into the permanent identity of who you are. When you apply the same structural consistency to your financial resources over decades, the results scale exponentially. To manage those long-term resources, personal finance experts like Harvard Law professor and U.S. Senator Elizabeth Warren developed the 50-30-20 budget rule to fully automate financial discipline. Looking at this diagram, you see a single paycheck divided strictly into 3 measured buckets. The impact of that 20% over time is best illustrated by the compound effect, using a case study of 3 individuals starting out in Austin, Texas, with identical salaries. Alex makes no changes, then makes small negative financial choices, and Carter strictly invests that 20% while reading 10 pages a day. For the first few months, their bank accounts look completely identical, but as they hit the 5-year mark, Carter's tiny, disciplined daily choices compound, creating a massive, mathematically unavoidable divergence in their net worth. Generational wealth does not just arrive overnight. It is the guaranteed mathematical output of a microscopic daily system compounded over a massive time horizon. Motivation will always fail you when you are tired or stressed. Extraordinary output does not rely on feeling inspired. It relies on a strict mathematical formula of small inputs stacked predictably over time. Modern hustle culture preaches constant anxiety and grinding until exhaustion. A system offers clinical, predictable peace. You simply check the boxes on the daily process, ignore the chaos, and let time do the heavy lifting. But if you attempt to integrate 20 different behavioral rules into your life by tomorrow morning, your system will immediately crash from overload. Instead, pick exactly 3 structural rules to serve as your foundation. Write them down tonight and commit to executing only those 3 rules when you wake up. You already possess all the necessary resources and raw materials. The compounding timeline begins the moment you put the system in motion.